What's up, everybody? Happy Friday, by the way. Happy Friday. Jay is here. He didn't get lost in some foreign country.
I didn't even get to the foreign country.
Yeah, but thanks for joining us. I'm Indy. That's Jay Powell, founder, Powell Group Consulting and Indie Game Business. And welcome to Indie Game Business. Today, we've got Mike Gallagher, and we are talking about the most requested subject, marketing, doing more with less, indie game marketing strategies. This is good because since the last time we had a marketing stuff, everything everything has changed.
All the stuff that we covered 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, it was 3 weeks ago. Everything is different now. So you want to make sure and gain some wisdom from Jay and Mike. So welcome, Mike.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, yeah, see, look, Mike even unmuted in Discord. He's better at this than I am. All right, so Mike, let's start where we love starting. Tell us how you originally got into the industry and then walk us through your career up to this point.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, before I even got into gaming, I had an entirely different career. I was in film and production. So I actually worked in the film industry for, almost 10 years. I'm from Vancouver, so it's cold and rainy in the summer, in the wintertime, actually almost all year round. So I kind of got tired of working outdoors under fake rain towers in the winter. I said enough is enough and went back to school, landed at a PR agency that was doing PR for the entertainment industry. Fast forward a little bit, I got pulled into EA and I was the engagement strategist on a couple of the sports titles. Loved it. You know how the industry kind of is very cyclical. I was a part of a layoff, unfortunately. Landed at Hyper Hippo. I was at Hyper Hippo as their director of player experience and then community and production for almost 4 years. That was great. Went to Hothead as their head of marketing. And then, about a year and a half ago, decided let's do this on my own. So I started my own gig. So I'm the founder of Untitled Advertising Lab. We're a small boutique marketing agency that focuses on small and mid-size game studios, mostly on PC. I'd say probably 60% of our work that we're working on right now is PC based. The other 40% is mobile and various other, tech adjacent clients within the gaming space.
Well, you've been around that. That's a fun thing, right? And then you decided the regular paycheck was just entirely too stable and you decided to start your own thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, Hothead actually ended up going belly up a little while ago. So there was a bit of wasn't necessarily by design, but ended up being it ended up being the right place at the right time with, like every good marketer. I hope if there's any marketers in the audience, I'm not giving away any secrets, but every marketer has some side contracts that they're working on. And so it was just kind of like a natural transition to kind of take some of these contracts and kind of give us that footing that we needed to get started.
So we're talking about how you're doing more with less as an indie dev. Let's just dive in there. I mean, unpack a bit what that means in 2025.
Sure. Jay, I don't know if it's just me, but I'm getting quite a bit of echo coming from you. So
you don't have me muted in Discord.
Let me do that. Okay. Can you repeat the question?
All right. So we're talking about how you're doing more with less in the industry right now for indie devs. So
yes,
for them, what does that mean in 2025?
Man, it's that's such a big question because every indie studio that we work with is different, right? So, I mean, I think before we even get started working on anything when we're working with indies, it's really understanding what the capabilities are in-house, right? And what the studio is able to do and help and support with. Because I mean, the big thing is we've done this with many small studios now. There's not usually a lot of money to go around, right? And so every dollar being precious, it's not just, hey, what are we what are we going to, pay Mike and his team to do? It's like, well, how can we make those dollars a lot more efficient by making sure we're focused on things that you don't have the ability to do in-house, and really starting to like help look internally at the studio resource and say, okay, well, you've got a great art team, you've got capacity, like let's teach them how to make marketing art and marketing assets so that we can go focus on other things, whether it's influencer outreach or PR, or helping you if you're a PC game, helping you with your Steam store strategy and making sure that everything is optimized correctly, looking at your screenshot strategy, trailers, that kind of stuff, and like giving you a leg up in areas that you might not be able to necessarily do by yourself. And then I mean, we're big believers in community and the power of community. And making sure that we're looking at player engagement across your entire player touch point stack, right? So whether it's early Discord growth, or your community hub on Steam, or something as little as the comment section of your app store, and making sure that all of those community touch points that just kind of take time, that a lot of studios don't have the time to do, as a very, very base level, start to have those engagements, because it's not a revolutionary concept, but the more engagement you've got across your entire marketing stack and marketing funnel, the wider your funnel is going to be, so that when you actually look to convert people, you have a much bigger chance and a much better shot at actually hitting your targets with growth. So it's a lot of optimization and looking at efficiencies so that you can really kind of like punch above your weight class.
So, I mean, obviously the next big thing on the horizon is NextFest, which is coming in 3 days or something like that. Yeah. So we know that it can be a very, it's a double-edged sword for indies. It's either, one, if you go ahead and use your NextFest before you have a publisher, chances are you're not going to get a publisher because it's such a marketing beat. But for those indies that are thinking about it, not necessarily for 3 days from now, because I'm pretty sure that ship has sailed, but
yeah,
for the next one, what should they be thinking about in terms of, do I go into NextFest? Do I not? If I am, what do I prepare for?
Yeah, I've had so many conversations with people about this for the October NextFest coming up. I think you have to be realistic with where you're at, right, to start. If you're planning on launching Q4 of this year, which maybe is not always necessarily the best idea because of AAA season, so you're looking at Q1, let's say January, when you're hoping to launch, then maybe the October NextFest makes sense, right? If you're not planning on launching soon after your NextFest, hit, don't waste your beat. You get one shot at this, and this is something that can create a lot of momentum. And if you don't necessarily have a lot of like paid spend or something like that you can use to really juice your marketing tactics and your marketing campaign long term, this is probably one of your best bets to try to really gain a lot of momentum for free before you launch. And so there is a lot of considerations. And I mean, I think the interesting thing about what you said about like the publisher side of things as well too, and you're right. If you've used your NextFest, you're probably going to hamper your ability to get a publisher. But I think we'll probably talk about this in a bit. But there is a bit of, like, in my opinion, a bit of a broken system with the way publishers are helping indie studios right now, because you're kind of getting onto this flywheel of, like, to get a publisher, you need analytics, you need wish lists, you need audience. To get that, you need marketing. To get marketing, you need money. To get money, you need a publisher. And usually by the time a lot of indie studios have gotten those metrics, those early audiences, wish lists, stuff like that, things that are showing momentum and showing indicators, that you're going to have a successful game, you don't always necessarily need to go the publishing route, because unless you're a game that has potential of reaching couple 100,000 wish lists, which the indie darlings of the world that are out there right now are kind of few and far between, as we know, because the algorithm kind of throttles a lot of what it is that we're trying to do. You can probably do this stuff on your own, right? And you can probably launch your game successfully on your own. You know, and when you jump in with the publisher and you get money and you're thinking and you're preparing for your next fest, what's probably going to end up happening is you've built up those momentum. You're probably leaning towards when you want to go into your next fest launch. And then the publisher is going to come back and say, here's a boatload of money. We want you to push your launch for 1.5 years because we want to do all of these updates to the game and do all these changes and pivots and all that kind of stuff. And all that early momentum and audience you've built that they wanted for you to actually kind of get into the room to have a conversation with them, you're going to lose that momentum with that early audience, and it's going to be, you know, sometimes all for naught, right? So NextFest is really, really strategic in your you know, what you're trying to do and when you're trying to like build out your campaign beats. And I think you just have to be really realistic about where you are on the stack and where you are and when you're trying to launch and if it makes sense. You know, and I know once you like, for you to even like consider going to NextFest as well too, you need to make sure you have some sort of marketing campaign that's set up to give you momentum going into it, right? I think it was, I know they were talking about this recently and the way the algorithm has changed for them serving up games across that 2-week time period. And what we've seen kind of change is like, there's a lot of even distribution within Steam's, you know, the way they serve people who are in you know, who are in NextFest, where the first week everyone kind of gets, you know, similar reach and similar eyeballs on their project. But then week 2 is whoever's been successful in week 1, whoever's shown the most momentum, they're the ones that are going to get served, right? So you need to be ready for that. You need to be gaming your entry and your marketing beats beforehand, and then through that first little bit to try to get as much momentum as you can. Because if you waste that first week, week 2 is not going to be of any benefit to you, and you're going to have blown your one real kick at the can to gain a lot of really great free momentum and visibility on their platform.
So is that change where everybody's on even footing, is that good or bad for indie devs?
I think it just levels the field out a little bit, right? Because you can now compete. You can compete. You know, you could say it's bad as well too, because then obviously people who are going into it with money are going to have a lot better chance of gaining it, like gaining that system or gaming that system and gaining visibility. But I mean, if you've done your pre-work, if you've built your community, and you've gotten people hyped and you've done it in the right way, where you're slowly, you know, putting the pressure on, so you know. Community graph goes from bottom left to top right. By the time you get to that first week, people should be hyped. They should be excited. You should have a strong community ready to jump in and play. And it can be a real benefit for you, because it does allow you to then show, hey, I am better than a lot of the other folks who are in this fest. We are worthy of attention.
It levels the field, but it's still a really fucking big field.
Yeah, it is a big field.
It's like, I mean, there's how many games on NextFest every year? I mean, we're pushing like 10,000, aren't we?
I don't remember the actual number, but it's a lot. it's a lot. And that's the thing, right? Like, that's why, you know, you don't want to take it lightly, right? You know, I've talked to some other studios, and they come to us, you know, a year after their NextFest has been used, and they're saying like, hey, we're ready to launch in 6 months. And I'm like, all right, cool. So we can line this up with the Oktoberfest. And they're just like, oh no, we used ours a year ago. I'm like, okay, well, what's your wish list like right now? And they're just like, oh, like 4,000. You're just like, did you get all that from the NextFest that you did like 6 months ago? And they're like, yep. And I'm like, okay, well, it's kind of a wasted kick at the can, you know? So it can really work in your favor. You know, you can get some really great bumps if you just kind of go into it and you kind of go in willy-nilly. But if you're not preparing for the long term and actually looking at it from like a campaign and like a holistic standpoint, yeah, you can really waste a really good opportunity.
So where do you most often see indie teams, you know, fail to get traction? I mean, even if they have a really, really good game, where do you most often see them fail to get traction leading up to a launch, or to a NextFest, which is in some ways like a launch?
Yeah, where do they fail to get traction? That's a good question. I think they underestimate how long things take and what's actually realistic. You know, I have to give it. I'm not a game developer, but I have to give it to game developers because everybody thinks that their game is the best and going to be the best next thing. And you have to, when you're putting that kind of level of investment and, you know, your blood, sweat, and tears and your life savings into building these products, like you have to really believe. And I get that, but a lot of times people forget how long it's going to take to market a game or where the game needs to be before we can even start building out marketing assets, right? And so there is a bit of a like, hey, we're going to go into October and do October NextFest. We're going to announce in September, right? But the game won't be ready to pull assets or pull gameplay footage to build trailers or marketing assets until like the end of August. And I'm like, so are you saying like you're giving us 2 weeks to build this campaign out? Like, well, you know, it's going to have to be pretty tight. It's like, well, it doesn't really work that way, right? Like we need to make sure that you're looking at the planning of marketing the same way that you're looking at the planning of building out your product. Like you need to be ready to build out a marketing campaign the same way you need to be ready to start production and development on your product. And you need to look at that timeline as a part of your dev cycle because these things take time. You know, unless you have like a couple $1 million to just throw in a marketing campaign and buy your way to the top. If you're doing this organic or with like a couple $1,000s here or there on like, let's call it Reddit or YouTube ad spends or something like that, you're not going to gain a ton of momentum. You do have to kind of keep that steady pressure on your community to grow your community and just continue to push forward. Because like, I mean, I won't name names, but we've talked to people. We've had to say no. Like, there's not enough time that we feel we can do what you're hoping to do because we're too close to launch or NextFest to actually build anything meaningful, and they're just going to waste their money. And if they're not able to push out their timelines for various investor reasons or whatever various reason people have for picking their timelines, if you can't push those things out to buy yourself enough momentum time, it's not worth it, and you're going to just set yourself up for failure as opposed to success.
So ads are always tricky, and even for marketing companies, figuring out what the recent Reddit algorithm is or whatever is just a nightmare in the first place. For the teams that aren't comfortable dumping money into ads, because I mean, you can very easily just piss away thousands of dollars in ads if they're not targeted properly and all this other stuff. Is building that traction something that can be done through social media or community management alone?
That's a big question. Yes, with a big but attached to it. Because
I like big. Sorry.
We're all slaves to algorithms nowadays, right? And social algorithms are no exception. I can't count how many times I've had people come to me and say like, hey, we want to make a campaign. We're going to base it off this like viral post that went viral with somebody else, the similar game. Can we make all our social content like potentially go viral? It's like, we can hope it can, right?
There's a button you press.
That's the hope. Yeah.
Go viral. Yes.
Yeah, the viral button. I think it's about a 6-figure boost budget that we add to that post. That's the viral button. You can, but you need to plan for incremental gains and you need to hope for virality, right? But at the same time, like, if you look at the meta algorithm, I believe the recent stat is something like your organic reach is going to be 2.5 to 5% of your audience per post. That's it. So even if you've gained 10,000 fans on your Instagram page, you reach 2.5 to 5% of them on average. And then whatever your engagement rate is on top of that, right? So what is that? Math in front of a big audience. I'm not going to do it, but 500 people, your 500 reach, I guess, on a post. And then, let's say your engagement rate is 2%. So then maybe you're going to get 10 people who are going to actually engage with your content. That's not a lot of momentum, right? That's not a lot of engagement. That's not meaningful. So then you have to start looking at, okay, well, how can I juice those numbers? What is, and then, if we only have, let's say, $500 a month to spend on paid social to increase your content's engagement, you have to start looking at indicators, right? What's working, what comms message is actually working, and what can you do to try to increase the visibility of those posts, right? And so you can't, it kind of goes back to, like, you can't just do for the sake of doing. You don't just want to put noise out into the ether and hope that somebody hears you. You need to be strategic about it. You need to plan it, and you need to make sure that you've got people who are going to be there and talk to people when they decide they want to talk to you. Otherwise, again, it's just opportunities that are going to be, slipping you by. So I look at social as very much like a net, right? You want to cast as wide of a net as possible. You want to make sure that you have somebody who's there that's going to catch all the fish that are falling into that net, because that's how you're going to start to make momentum or gain momentum. Because the other side of things is nobody wants to be first through the door, right? Nobody wants to be the first person to follow a page, follow a game, because unless they're a tastemaker or an influencer, let's be real, everybody's afraid to have an opinion unless somebody else has already validated it. Especially on social, right? Especially nowadays with identity social and showing who your online persona is. We're afraid to stand out of the crowd and be individuals, unless we are traditional influencers, especially on social. So you need to make sure you have a bit of an early audience before you're even going to gain momentum. I said a lot of stuff there. I hope that makes sense. I hope that was as cohesive in my mind as I thought it was.
I don't think the being afraid to express their opinion is a problem on this show from week to week. But,
Good.
That's just us. But no, you did. And what sucks is that you skipped through. I mean, you hit like 3 of the questions that Dan has laid out for us here, and now I have to adjust it. But luckily, we have a wonderful community. So, question up from Twitch. Striker Wolf Games, what is the ideal timeline for campaigning for a NextFest? 3 months, 6 months, 48 hours? What do we got?
That's a great question. I'm going to pose a counter question back to this person if I don't know if they're able to answer quickly. Has the game been announced?
All right, let's assume it didn't while we're waiting on an answer. Okay.
Well, if it hasn't announced, anywhere between 6 to 3 months. So that's a really hard question, because if you're starting from an announcement, and if you're hoping to launch 6 months out, I would say probably no. I'm learning the process. Okay, I would say let's call if you have no money, if you don't have a ton, and you're trying to just bring yourself to launch, I would say you probably want to have a 6-month campaign from announcement to launch, right? So you're going to have various beats in there, right? So you have your announcement beat where you're going to put whatever your investment is. I would say probably your announcement, your NextFest, and your launch are your biggest beats, right? And you're going to kind of want to go like this with your resources and then spool back down, because there's going to be a natural dovetail of momentum coming out of your announcement. And then you're going to want to start to put that steady pressure on as you kind of go, let's call it, it's tough to give it a timeline, but let's call it 3 months just based on the answers you said. That kind of leads from announcement up to NextFest. So if you're thinking October is the NextFest that you want to go after, work backwards from that. You probably want to announce your game in July, August, if you're available. I mean, the nice thing is, if you're going to Gamescom or something like that, you have another platform that you can use to leverage if you're able to attend and go through the indie booth side of things and gain wish lists and followers and have conversations with real players at the event. That might not be possible, but either way, look at kind of that as an early time frame, based on just looking at the October thing. Go to the October NextFest, and then you want to kind of keep that steady momentum up. I would avoid launching in November, December for obvious reasons, because that's when AAA buys up all the airwaves for all their various sales and all that kind of stuff, and it's not worth it. You want to probably look at January, February, probably more February, well, maybe end of January. Depends on the game and kind of where you're at and the traction you get, but probably around that time frame for launch. The other thing that a lot of times people forget is launch is great, but you need to make sure that you've got something left in the bank for after launch, because your wish lists are not always going to convert at 100%, right?
Well,
There's a percent.
Or 10%.
Yeah, and the numbers that I've read are between 10 and 20% will convert within the first day that you actually launch. So, if you've reached that, for some reason, the magical number of 10,000 wish lists, and if you can survive off, 1,000 to 2,000 game sales in day one, great. But I think for a lot of times, the investment that we make in games is, that's nothing, right? That's not a realistic sales target. So you need to keep the pressure on post-launch so that it's not just, hey, we're live, and then we're quiet. It's, hey, we're live, and here's all the great things that are coming out of the community that's now currently playing the game. Because, it's one thing to keep people hyped to get them to launch. It's another thing to get people hyped after it launches. And that is an entirely different marketing campaign and marketing message than trying to get people to wishlist or to follow your Steam page before it's live.
So in a situation like that, is it better to go as an early access launch? Do you get like forgiveness from gamers if the game is not quite as polished if you call it early access, or should you just bite the job in?
That's a great question. So early access is interesting because it really depends on what your plans are when you go from early access to launch or 1.0, whatever you want to call it, right? If you're trying to, like, let's say, just kind of, if you're going to be adding a bunch of features later on, and this is not necessarily the full game experience, or not necessarily like the full world or the full level pack or the full amount of character, whatever it might be, right? Like, if you're holding content back and you're giving people a really good taste of what the game is going to be, then yeah, you can call it early access, and people will give you, they usually give you a little bit more in terms of like leeway or whatever you want to call it, forgiveness in how the game is. But you need to make sure that you've got something else for when you launch, because those players are going to stick with you, and you need to give them a reason to stick with you, right? I know some people do like a free early access, and then they do like a paid 1.0 or paid launch version, right? Why would people pay if you're not adding extra, right? Why would people pay if you're not expanding the game in a significant way or adding features that are going to make your experience that much better? You need to give them reason. And if you're not able to give them reason later on, if this is like the best the game is going to be outside of like quality of life updates or patches or whatever, then don't do early access. It's a tool, but it is a tool that you need to make sure that you are expressly telling people there is more coming.
See, good answer, Mike. Good answer. I'm going into Family Feud mode. All right, so from Dim Panther on YouTube, how do you build a community before announcing your game? I'm afraid a devlog channel will only bring in other developers.
Yeah, that's a good question. Again, it depends on how early you are, right? Like I look at your community strategy in a way that, understand. If you look at, okay, well, let me back up for a second. If you look at like traditional tech sales for new technology, let's say, right? You've got like your early adopters, you've got, your can't even remember all the pieces now. Early adopters, early majority, vast majority, laggards, I think is how it goes. And so there's this curve, right? And so right at the very beginning of that bell curve, there's a small group of people that are going to be the ones who are always going to invest in and try new games, give you a chance. And you know what? They probably are going to be family and friends and developers and other people within your community. That's okay in the very, very beginning. The reason I say that's okay going back to what I was saying earlier, is you need first through the door. You need people to go in and validate your project socially on various community channels, so that when other people see it, they don't think they're the first ones, right? They don't think, oh, I don't know, like this is a game that only has 10 people who are following on Instagram. I'm, whatever. That's a nothing. It's a nothing burger, right? I don't care about that. Whereas like if they have, let's just throw a number of 300 to 500 people following them on a community, all of a sudden they're like, oh, there's people there. People actually are starting to care, right? And then you're going to be able to start building those out. So you have to think about that when you look at your content strategy, right? And how you want to promote the game. And so one of the things that I've done before, and we continue to kind of like promote and kind of use as a core strategy for some studios, depending on who they are and what they're capable of, is looking at like your early content strategy being very glass box, right? We are the developers. We are the ones who are building this game. Here we are. This is us. Let me tell you my story about how we came up with this game idea, right? Devlogs are great to kind of like help you get that message across. Showing early concept art, sketches, that kind of stuff, getting people excited, right? Because if you think you're 6 months away from potentially even either announcing or getting into NextFest or whatever it might be, you don't really have anything you can show, right? You're not going to have a gameplay trailer or a cinematic or narrative trailer or anything like that to show, because it's way too early in most cases. And so you look at that very glass box approach to your content strategy and your community strategy, and as you kind of get closer and closer to announcement or to NextFest or launch or whatever it might be, that glass starts to fog over, right? So you become a little less transparent and a little bit more, here are pieces of the game. Here is an early concept of a character running. Here is early gameplay video. Here is the trailer. Here is the announcement. Here is the character debuts, blah, 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 right? And so you kind of go from like the conversation shifts from looking at developers over here, and you turn your gaze over to look at the shiny object within the game over here, and it brings your audience through that journey the same way that you're bringing your audience through like a traditional bell curve for adoption of new technology, right? It's like we start with talking the language of the people who are there early to the vast majority of people who are come just to buy a game. We're talking to them in the language they expect to be talked to, which is, tell me about the game, tell me about the product. And we've taken everybody else on that same journey along the way. So it's okay if your early community is a developer community. Just make sure you have the tools in place to shift them to be more in line with, I'm going to call them a game purchasing community, a community that will convert into actual players.
All right, so to follow on that real quick, then, is it possible to overshare? Because that's what Stricker Wolf's next question was. They're afraid of potentially oversharing. So, is there a point when you need to keep some stuff under your hat?
I think that's when you need to talk to your marketing experts and say, what are our strategic beats going to be? That's the short answer. If you're going to have a narrative, you can say, hey, this is the world we're playing in, but maybe don't give away the narrative beats. If you're like the Last Berserker, for example, don't show me every single boss that I have to go fight and give away, who the big boss is and all that kind of stuff. Give me boss battles and show me cool action sequences, but don't tell me what I'm seeing, right? So I don't think that you can overshare depending on where you're at, but you can definitely overshare too much information. I think it goes back to the whole, saying like, show, don't tell. Show me what I'm going to see, but don't tell me what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think narrative is the one place where you have to be very, very careful. But other than that, it's like, we picked up our Switch 2 last night or yesterday. Yeah. We're playing Mario Kart, and my 13-year-old is already telling me what all the new power-ups are. And I'm like, how the f do you know this? And
yeah.
Oh, I've been watching. So, I mean, in an age of, especially the younger generation, not necessarily me, watching all of this stuff and consuming every trailer and every single piece of media that comes out about a game, I don't think you have to worry about oversharing anymore because everything's already overshared. You know?
Once your game is live, man, if people like your game, they're going to talk about it to the nth degree. There is no secrets, right? Once somebody is, completed your game, that information is very likely going to get out. That's a good point, because it goes back to what I was saying earlier about, once you've launched your game, what's next? What is your content strategy going to be once the game is live, right? There is something to be said about owning that type of tutorial style content, instead of letting an influencer or a news outlet get it, or preparing it so that you can give it to the IGNs of the world and they can push your message for you by saying like, hey, here's a great strategy for all your power-ups for Mario Kart for the Switch 2, right? Here's what you need to know. And then they're pumping your message for you to their audience, right? Which is another great, another big thing is like tapping into other people's audiences to help grow your audience. I'm sure if anybody knows anything about like SEO or anything like that, like backlinks have always been super important. It's the same kind of thing, right? Like trying to tap into as many different outlets and audiences as you possibly can to bring as many eyeballs and as much traffic to your content as possible.
I mean, on the upside, we had all the characters unlocked in like 45 minutes last night. So I mean, there's that part of it. That part of it too.
Was it good? I haven't played it yet. Is it
okay?
Is it
so this is going to get me in trouble. The Switch 2. This is Jay's like quick take. It's nothing groundbreaking. It's not like the original Switch where it's like, holy shit, here's these Joy-Cons that do this and you can take it everywhere. It's a bigger, more powerful Switch, and the Mario Kart game is really cool. But it's like all of them. But I texted my brother last night and I said, look, man, new Nintendo just dropped. And once again, I dropped $700 on consoles and controllers just so I can play Mario Kart again. And it is what it is. I mean, it's more powerful. It's going to be better stuff coming for it. Yeah. But it's not like, oh my God, such a big jump and so technically revolutionary from the first one.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I was lucky. I live in a small town and the college isn't in. And so while everybody else was waiting in line yesterday, I literally walked into Staples at 11:30, told them what I wanted and walked right back out with one. So
amazing.
It's good. It's like, yeah, I mean, I love it. I'm glad I have it, but it's not like, ooh,
Yeah.
It's got Mario Kart. What else do you need? All right. So that was Jay's quick take on the Switch 2 launch. Alexi on YouTube. To tag on the question about building an audience, how do publishers respond to projects that have already been exposed on social media with work in progress gameplay footage or concept art?
So I mean, that's going to be publisher to publisher specific, right? I wouldn't have like a full answer for that, but in my experience, what I've seen is a lot of times if you don't have a publisher and you're already showing gameplay footage and all that kind of stuff, and you end up signing with a publisher, and you've got like, let's like use that as an example. I'm trying to think of the best way to frame this. Usually what would happen, and what I've seen happen in a lot of times, is once you get a publisher investment, or publisher signed onto your project, they're going to say, all right, we're going to give you whatever the terms are. We need you to go back to the drawing board on feature A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We want to update it this way, and this is what we need to see happen for us to consider it a marketable game. And you'll probably end up going radio silent for 1.5 years while you go in and fix the game. Which is going back to kind of what I was saying earlier, where it's like if you've got a lot of early momentum, and you're struggling to find publishers, you should probably look at self-publishing and doing it yourself, as opposed to going with a publisher who's going to set you back 1.5 years. So it's also very easy, like if you own that with footage that's out live, to archive it on your social channels or on your community channels. But at the end of the day, like, I mean, I don't know if any of you are playing Expedition 33, but there was a post that was found on Reddit from like 4 years ago of early concept footage of that game. And it resurfaced, and honestly, it resurfaced as like a community marketing beat, which just made the conversation about the game explode again, because people started saying like, this is cool, like this is where it was. Things have come a long ways with the game that we're actually playing now. And you can lean into that, right? You can lean into that, but it's going to be publisher to publisher specific, and most likely they're just going to tell you to archive it, take it down, or to go silent for a bit in your marketing, which I hate, because then you lose all that momentum and community goodwill that you've built up early on.
So from the publisher standpoint, or the quasi-publisher standpoint, it really depends on how good it is. I mean, that's the thing. It's like if it's good, if the audience likes what you're showing with that work in progress gameplay and concept art, and you're getting traction, the publisher is going to get excited as well. Because you have to remember, publishers and scouts are watching the same social media everybody else is. Mm-hmm. So if they see something and it takes off, then that's going to be helpful. If they see something that gets no traction and it's not interesting to them either, then they're not going to care. But if you're putting out consistent, good quality stuff, yeah, that's going to get you noticed, and it's not a bad thing. I mean, honestly, the first question that comes out of about 70% of the publishers when you submit your game now is, how many wish lists do you have? And so don't be afraid of oversharing. The whole keep everything a secret and let the publisher launch everything first and foremost, unless you have launched another, 2 wildly successful games, that's not the reality of the industry anymore. As an indie, you have to be looking out for yourself and be preparing to self-publish. And you can't do that if you are not publishing your stuff that's out there. Plus, if you put it out there and it sucks, then people are going to give you feedback, and you're going to go, oh, wait, maybe my shit sucks and I should work on it. And so there you go. All right, Lantana. Hey, Lantana, good to see you. I haven't seen you, or I haven't recognized you. You haven't asked a question in a very long time. Hey, so what are some of the out-of-pocket marketing strategies that you've had success with or seem to be successful, i.e. something besides the standard PR, streamers, NextFest, etc.? Skyride.
Man.
Yes.
Man. Yeah. That's a big question. Trying to think. I've got a couple examples. Trying to think of the best ones that are going to answer this. So, okay, I've got one. So when I was working at Hyper Hippo, and I don't know if everybody knows this, knows them as a studio, but they do idle clicker games. Nothing crazy. AdCap has been around now for 10 years, which is insane, and it's still a profitable mobile game. Fun little game, but I can't believe it's still going strong. When I first came in and took over that team, they had this is all pre-COVID. They had a very small marketing organization. They weren't really doing anything crazy, and the first thing that they weren't growing. They were spending a ton of money on UA, and they had I think it was a 180 to 200 day payback window for break even, which is, it's not bad for an idle clicker game, but it's still quite long. They were spending a lot of money on UA. And so first thing that we saw when we came in there was they had a game AdCap and they had another one AdCom. And when we looked at these two individually from a community perspective, you would think that an idle clicker game is probably not going to have a strong community. It had a large following, but nobody was engaging, nothing like that. But the people who were engaging were always, speaking to us on AdCom in this fake Russian cosplay accent on social media. All their answers were all hail glorious leader. I have great bug to report to our comrade, stuff like that, right? Comrades and glorious leaders and stuff like that. And the base level item that we had in the game was a potato, right? And so you would mine potatoes, you'd trade potatoes for science points would trade for weapons, blah, 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 right? And, on AdCap side, it was lemons. And so what we found was okay, well, there's a little nugget there that our community was giving us, was they are buying into the cosplay of this game. And so we started speaking back to them in that same language, right? And as we started to do that, we noticed engagement rates started to skyrocket. People got really into it. They just wanted to talk to us because we were going to talk to them in the same way. On the flip side, what we found with AdCap was that the community wasn't talking about, because it's a capitalist game, it's all about making money. It's a money generator. So it wasn't about millions, billions, trillions, or quadrillions. It was about quintillions or centillions, or like these absurd amounts of money. So, it wasn't like, we would make fun of Elon Musk because we were like, okay, well, he wants to go to Mars. Well, we've already bought Mars, right? We own Mars, and he has to pay taxes to come land on our planet, type thing, right? Or we've got we summer on the moons of Saturn, type thing, right? Like, because you just take everything to this like extreme with the content that we would produce, and people would buy into that as well too. And so now we had these two communities that were starting to really buy into the language that we were saying, very, very simple language changes in the way we're talking to our communities. And then we noticed that there was an opportunity to cross promote the games with each other. And so we looked at the two and we're like, how can we do this? And so we started this Spy versus Spy comic series, where we called it How to Crush Capitalism or How to Crush Communism, depending on which channel you were on. And we would just make comics where the two main characters, the capitalist and the communist, would do Spy versus Spy Roadrunner style gags, and people really, really bought into it, to the point where we were able to eliminate our remarketing budget. So we ended up saving about, I think it was like $300,000 across the year just on UA spend we were able to eliminate, but we saw no degradation in our in-app purchases or in our in our ad revenue or anything like that. So through that very, very simple tweaking of the communication style that we had and the cross promotion with the work that we were doing, we were able to increase the margins of the product itself, by a significant amount of money, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so little things like that, trying little things and committing to them, can make a huge, huge difference in your marketing. When I was at EA, and I know, if you post something about EA, then obviously you're going to get somebody to show up, and we have community show up. But we did very, very, and I'm trying to think of simple things that are easy and low cost, low pickup, right? So that we're talking indies, we're not talking AAA marketing. But we were launching, and we were working with an influencer to launch NHL 18, which is one of their smaller sports franchises. Obviously, it's peanuts compared to FIFA. We did a very, very simple activation where we got the off the bench guys, which are, I don't know if anyone in the community is Canadian. They're small little Canadian hockey bro comedians on Instagram, right? We flew them to Toronto, and we just met with them in Toronto, and we did, which is a hockey hungry market for anyone who might not be a hockey fan. And we just posted on their Instagram account a couple random pictures around the city. And what we did was we basically started a scavenger hunt of, hey, if you find us at these various locations throughout the day around the city, you get a free copy of the game. It kind of actually became a lot bigger than we were expecting. The first location that we went to, we had 500 people show up. And I was like, I did not bring this many copies of the game. So I brought 2 sleeves. So we had 20 Xbox and 20 PlayStation games or something like that. So but we ended up generating a huge amount of social impressions, right? And we ended up actually having to change our tactics on the fly, where it was like, okay, if you show up, the first person who answers a trivia question to us gets the game, and we're going somewhere else, right? Because it was just it got overwhelming. But it was, little things like that, just tapping into, and I think honestly, the takeaway from that is tapping into the culture of the community and the game and what you're trying to get into, and understanding where their fandom comes from beyond just, I'm a Fortnite player, so I'm going to go to or I'm a Disney player, so I'm going to go to Comic-Con, or whatever, right? Step outside of the traditional stuff and look at that secondary layer of influencers and secondary layer of people who are within your community. I mean, these guys are like, the reason they have a following besides their comedy on Instagram is because they were like peewee hockey coaches that to help coach their peewee team, they would make skits on how to do things properly on ice. So they started as coaches trying to teach their kids through comedy to be better at hockey. And they blew up because of that. And now they're hockey influencers, and you know what I mean? And so like, it's I know it kind of, your question was like besides influencers, and so I think my answer for that is more like look at the culture of the genre or that you're trying to play within and find opportunities to tap into that. We're working with a studio who is potentially, hopefully they get their funding, launching a game about firefighting and wildfires. And one of the things that we're going to look at doing is something similar, but tapping into local firefighting or like fire awareness programs, like Yogi the Bear style programs and stuff like that, and see how we can kind of tap into those kind of niche community followings to give a different audience a perspective of something that they normally wouldn't get. Again, looking at that laggard curve, that bell curve, it's that late majority of people that you're trying to tap into that are going to be the big audience that you need to convert to make your game successful. I hope that answered your question. Those are just the examples I could think of off the top of my head.
So you just get Shorzy to come in and do promos for NHL 27. That should absolutely be a team in that game. So, I mean, we've talked a lot about self-publishing and preparing for self-publishing. And it can be, especially from the marketing standpoint, extremely arduous and overwhelming. So what are some of the basic steps, or even some of the more complex steps that teams can take to make that more manageable? You know, the whole you can only eat an elephant by taking it one bite at a time. What can teams do on the marketing side to make self-publishing more manageable?
Yeah. So I want to draw a line in the sand when it comes to self-publishing with marketing partners or taking it on themselves, because obviously QA and localization and some of those other things don't really fall under that umbrella. So we're gonna just push that aside from like the self-publishing standpoint. With the marketing side, again, I think it's understand what your timeline is. Really, really understand what your timeline is to develop and to get your game to launch. And be realistic, right? You know, we've worked with folks who have said, yeah, we're going to announce, you know, in a month from now, and then they come back and they say, well, we're reevaluating the entire art direction of the game. Okay, great. That's fine. That's going to push out your launch window. Well, we can't push out our announcement window. Well, we can't build a trailer in 2 weeks. You know, we need assets, right? So you need to be very clear and have those deadlines. And sometimes it just means having hard conversations with your team. I know none of us want to crunch or anything like that, and I'm never going to advocate for that. But like, if you set these deadlines, they can't be arbitrary. You have to hit them, right? It's especially when you're working with marketing, because everything you've done for development, you need to understand now has to be done again on the marketing side, right? And it does take time to bring you to, you know, the finish line. So starting with strategy, you know, really, really understand your strategy, understand your projections, understand where you need to get to from the sales target, and really set those goals up from the beginning. And then look at the beats, right? What are your major beats? What type of game do you have? And what is the content that you can use to talk about within that time frame to keep that momentum live, right? And it's just setting those beats up, right? As a first step. What do you want to talk about? How do you want to talk about it? Where are you going to amplify it? Who is going to be your press partners or your influencer partners if you're going that way, that route? If you have a community, how are you going to activate your community? Have those conversations and just focus on the strategy, right? And then agree on the dates. That should be your step one. If everything fails and all you end up doing is announcing the game announcing you're going to NextFest, and then launching, at least know what those dates are going to be so that you can make sure that you're ready from a production side to get there. The next bite, I mean, art is a huge lift. Bring on an art partner, have someone who, or have someone on your team who's going to be dedicated to making marketing assets. They're a lift, right? And if you think that like getting the art right in the game is tough, at least, you know, if you're in a game, you have an entire world to explore. So there's different angles and all these different things, right? So you can see the fidelity as you're going around different elements within the game or looking at cards or whatever. From a marketing perspective, you have one angle, one shot, right? It needs to be as crisp and as good looking as you can possibly make it. So you can't underestimate the amount of time it's going to take to actually get those pieces of content right. You know, it's not as long as building a game. I'm not going to, you know, I'm never going to argue that, but it does take time. And then you need somebody who is going to be able to execute and manage that distribution of content and the execution of your strategy. The other thing that I've you know, the big thing that I've noticed and you know, besides, or the conversations I have a lot, especially at conferences when I'm meeting with like indies and stuff like that, is they say, well, you know, we could work with you guys, we could work with a publisher, or we could hire in-house, right? Those are kind of like the three big options. I'm like, all right, what's your budget for marketing for the year? Well, we got, let's say $100,000, right? Okay, well, if you're going to hire somebody, hire a marketing manager who's actually going to have experience and be able to do a lot of things that we just talked about. Let's say their salary is $75K for the year, right? And then you've got overhead, then you've got, how are you going to support them? Who's going to do the art for them? What are all the other pieces that go along with them? All of a sudden you start to do the math and hiring an internal marketing team becomes quite expensive, right? And if you don't have a publishing partner or agency partners to support with that, that becomes a very big financial risk and lift. You know, and so there is a lot of these big considerations. And so making sure that you have those conversations and make considerations over how you're going to actually execute early on, and understand and be realistic about what you can spend, what your timelines are, and what your goals are.
Awesome. Mike, thanks. This has been fantastic. I mean, this hour went by extremely quick.
Yes, this was good stuff, man. This is cool. Good stuff. And there was a question from MFR Egon. Yes, you can watch it here on the VOD. The VODs only stay up on Twitch for a little bit, though. You can also watch on YouTube.
Go to our YouTube
Indie Game Business. Yeah, YouTube. Go to the YouTube. There's a ton of information on YouTube. Awesome, a ton.
Got some cool stuff on that YouTube.
We have we hit 1,000 videos? You know,
I don't think we've quite hit 1,000 yet, but we're close.
I bet you we have. But anyways, thank you so much, Mike, for coming on here. We appreciate you so much. This has been amazing, an amazing talk. And we have 756 videos. Okay, I had to look at the same.
There you go.
That's still close. Hey, Striker Wolf and Danny, what's up? Welcome, Danny. I'm glad to talk to you. Thank you, guys. Yeah, join the Discord if you're not in the Discord, discord.gg/IndieGameBusiness. Also, check everything out on Indie Game Business. Our next conference is in September, so that's something to look forward to. Now, Jay's going to go play his Switch 2 that he thought it was meh. He's still going to go play it.
I owned the 13-year-old enough last night at Mario Kart. I'm not sure if he's going to want to come back and take more today. But
how late did you stay up playing it?
I didn't stay up that late. No.
Oh yeah.
I was actually in meetings last night at 9:30. So
yeah. Hamster Hammer, what's up, buddy? Yeah, thank you so much. Anything else, Jay?
Oh no, we are good. Y'all have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you next week. And once again, Mike, are you in the Discord? You are in the Discord. So if y'all have questions that come up later, you know, we'll make sure Mike gets that coveted speaker tag, and you can always ask there as well. But aside from that, everybody have a great weekend, a great next week, and we'll see you Friday.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.